Hello and welcome back to another State of CS. It's number 11. Myself, Natu, and Ven are going to be bringing you through all the ups and downs, the comings and goings of CS. Of course, we'll be talking about some of the roster changes heading into the DreamHack Las Vegas. So how you guys doing? You all good?
Still alive?
Yeah, that's where we're at right now. Still alive, so good.
Yeah, I had a bit of a rough week here so far. Everyone's just sick, and but yeah, it comes with the territory. Kind of have to make do. That's what it is.
Parenting, man. Parenting. I said this to you before. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, I don't know how I do it either. So I think we're on even ground in that
I think
regard.
the sauna and the hot tub helps.
It does, definitely does. Yeah. It's somewhere you can put your thought into when things are getting really rough.
This is started on quite a somber note, hasn't it? So let's just jump into some of the roster changes. Some of them themselves, honestly, are fairly somber notes, depending on which team you're talking about here. But let's kick it off with North. So obviously, Rubino heading out made a statement yesterday about his reasons for doing so, about lacking motivation, having some personal issues, and AZ in. So what do you guys take on this? Because I think a lot of people had seen that Rubino's performances maybe not quite up to the standard that he set originally. AZ, of course, is a phenomenal player. So where do you guys stand with that?
I think, first of all, I think it's worth noting that it's kudos to Rubino to be so open and honest about like all this stuff. I don't think a lot of people would be, as he has been, and like being truthful to his teammates and knowing himself that he might be dragging his team down just because he doesn't feel like he's been able to put in the effort that needs to be had. So, I mean, I'm just surprised in a positive way that he's that kind of a stand-up guy who's going to kind of take one for the team and step down because he doesn't feel like he's going to be able to deliver to the extent that needs to be done, especially now that North is contending for tournament wins more and more, and they're like finding a new level for this team. So adding AZ, I mean, it's definitely it's an upgrade in terms of raw skill. I don't think there's a debate in that regard. Even though Rubino is a massively talented player, especially when it comes to clutches. I think he's very underrated when it comes to that kind of stuff. He's won a bunch of one-on-X situations in his time with this team. But in terms of just raw skill, I think AZ is definitely a level up. But how does it function in a team is a different thing. Though they did have that one tournament, WESG European qualifier, where they play with AZ, and it looked pretty good. So they have history, and they've played together previously. So I think it should, in theory, be an upgrade for this team.
Yeah, no, I think that as well. We've seen what AZ's been able to do when he's when he's been put into a role where he can thrive, and he did that last time he was in a team with MSL as well. So I don't have too many worries. And again, for me, the big thing is really what Yona mentioned early, the fact that Rubino's so mature about the situation, the fact that he can't give it his all. So he, instead of basically grasping onto that sweet contract that they've signed with North, right, and just making bank off of that, delivering subpar performances, he's adult enough or mature enough to actually just see take it for what it is and make the better call for his team, because he's one of those players who got to the point where he is by putting in an immense amount of work. He's not necessarily the most naturally gifted Counter-Strike player in that sense. A lot of the reasons why he's gotten into these top teams is because he's extremely good at figuring out a role and actually working on it to an extreme amount. So if he can't put in that kind of an effort anymore, then yeah, I think it's a logical move to make. But I think way too many people are just going to hang on to the fact that he's leaving such a good situation for himself just from a financial standpoint, which is a shame, because he should be applauded for actually making the best decision for both him personally and the team.
Yeah, it goes to show as well, right, guys, that your mental state and how you feel, it depends obviously on what you put forward first, but clearly he wants to make sure he's happy other than rich, because ultimately traveling around the world, you guys know as well as I do just how taxing that can be on you mentally. If you've got a lot of things in the back of your head, the last thing you want to be doing is going from event to event to event, especially if you feel like you're letting your teammates down. So clearly he thought, okay, well, I've got this this great contract, but I'm not really happy, so I'll take a step back. And again, I agree with both of you. I think you need to applaud him for that rather than to focus on the finances of it all.
Yeah, I think it's the saying that you work to live, you don't live to work is apt in this kind of a situation. So you want to be happy in your life, because it doesn't matter how much money you have if you can't find happiness, as cheesy as it might sound, right?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to motivate yourself to play plus 10 hours a day if you're not feeling it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's the amount of work you need to put into it. It's your heart and soul to be able to be in that few percentage that is actually capable of fighting for tournament victories, and that's what a competitive minded person always, that's his focus number one. Money is something that makes life easier, and it's a great perk when it comes to being a big time esports player nowadays, but it's only one aspect to it.
Yeah, and I think it's it needs to be noted the fact that this is not something like out of the blue from Rubino as well. Like, he's had thoughts about taking a break from playing multiple times. He even did it. I think it was early summer when again, I guess this was around the WESG qualifiers and when Powerland was happening as well in Denmark, because he took a couple of weeks off. The team played with AZ instead, and that was just for him to manage to sort out stuff that was going on in his personal life and that kind of stuff. But even before that, he has contemplated, taking a break from CS, because it is a pretty insane grind for these players to maintain for so long, especially with all the traveling. The fact that you can't really establish, or it's really hard to establish a life at home and try to keep that in balance while you're, traveling 280 days out of the year. So, yeah.
No doubts, no doubts. So we just mentioned AZ, of course, going into North. He will be vacating his spot in FaZe, and this is one of the biggest, I'd guess shock may be an overstatement, but a lot of people were quite surprised to hear that Nico is joining them, and for a reported $500,000 buyout, which is like pretty mad. So my understanding is that FaZe won't be playing with him at Vegas. Jacob's going to be instead.
That's correct.
But obviously, in terms of a roster change, that's one hell of an upgrade for FaZe. He's a top 5 talent. Most people would agree.
Yeah. It's pretty nuts, just straight up. And we talked about how, in terms of skill, AZ is an upgrade for Rubino in North, but you can't find pretty much a better upgrade than Nico, I think. Again, the big question is how it's all going to fit, like how it's all going to work out in a team aspect. That's going to be the real question mark. So FaZe still has, the same tag that they've always had, in that sense, that they have incredible players, just enormous amount of skill, but it all depends on how they're able to actually utilize it as a team. But luckily, they've gotten way, way, way better after Kerrigan came into that team. So hopefully that's going to be something that continues on. And if it does, I don't see any reason why FaZe wouldn't be like one of the tournament favorites for a lot of 2017.
Yeah, it definitely does add a completely different layer to this lineup again. I think, it's ridiculous how expensive this team is, by the way, and how much money FaZe has poured into Counter-Strike in the last 12 months or so. Anyway, I mean, I think definitely. I mean, Nico is Nico. He's not had the greatest of times recently in Mouse, but can you really blame him? I mean,
could have a great time.
He's literally been in a friggin' prison, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And you can see it on his every facial expression on at the major, for example, how he was just frustrated every single time. So I mean, he must be feeling the freedom right now. But I think the big keys for FaZe is that now that they have like these sick tools, like they have the sickest tools combined basically for different roles. It comes down to Kerrigan and Robin. How can they make this work as a unit? But I'm actually pretty positive just from seeing how once Kerrigan joined this lineup, I think the progression has been even a little bit more than I expected, especially in the early of the first 60 days or so when they were traveling, like pretty much like 55 of it, they were on the road. And still they managed to become more of a team pretty much every single time they played. So again, a great testament to the fact that a team needs a decisive, good leader for a team to function. I think Davi is probably the example from the other end, where you don't have one if you have so much skill. But yeah, I think it does look really good for them as long as Kerrigan and Robin can make things work for the team.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, the fact that Nico's not going to go from a role in Mousesports where he actually had to be an in-game leader as well. And as you said, Nico hasn't necessarily been like as lights out as we saw him at the start of his Mousesports career. So I just see his potential to, like, in terms of performance, skyrocketing as well, like going back to that old high as well, which should be really, really fun for FaZe and really, really terrifying for everyone else.
Do you guys see Nico maybe coming in as a secondary leader in that team, or do you think they'll just free him up to be the monster, almost the Terminator that he's been in previous times?
I think it's got to be Terminator.
Yeah, please make him just kill things. Yeah. Stop him from thinking anything team related. Just put him in place, tell him what to do, and he'll improvise the rest to the best of his abilities. I mean, it's been a bit of a headache reading Nico's the in-game leader of Mousesports. Like, yeah, how does that gonna work? I mean, there's only so many people in this world that are capable of being really good fragger and in-game leader at the same time, because it is just a fact that it takes from your focus when you have to think of the whole big picture all the time. So definitely, hopefully, he's not gonna have to be that.
That, for sure, I completely agree with you. That does obviously leave Mousesports in quite the interesting position. I heard that they were going to have Chris J back into the roster again after benching him. I don't know. I guess Chris J is quite a strong guy, because part of me would be like, screw you guys. I'm done. I'm out of here. Obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that. But he will be going alongside Oscar. Now, back, I think it was Gfinity last year when they first picked up Oscar, and he had a horrific performance, and then it ended up kind of edging him out over a period of time. You had this position where Oscar was kind of AWPing, but then Chris J was a little bit, but then Oscar was, and then he gave it up. Where do you see that one coming down? Do you think that Chris J is just going to fit into a rifle fully, or will Oscar maybe sacrifice a little bit there?
I think that team's just dead in the water.
Just screwed. Okay,
yeah.
Brilliant.
I feel bad for Oscar though, because he joins and like he comes back into the Mousesports lineup with Nico. So and Nico, apparently wanted to play with Oscar as well. So he's coming back into that team. It's like, okay, second chance at things, gonna make things right. And then a couple of weeks later, Nico's gone. So now Oscar's like, well, what the hell did I sign up for? Definitely not this. Because now he's just because now he's in a Mousesports version that is worse than the one he initially joined and couldn't really get the hang of, or like in terms of making the best out of his skill. Now he's just left with less utility or like less room to work with, because he doesn't have a Nico to take attention away from him, right? So I have no idea how this Mousesports is going to work. I think they're going to be a slaughter victim in Vegas.
Yeah. I don't I think the questions are way bigger than how is this Oscar Chris J kind of synergy when it comes to opping is going to work. I think it's just the big picture. How is this team going to function all together? They lack in so many ways. It's added, like, it's hard to pinpoint like what exactly are you even going to talk about when it comes to Mousesports, because it's been like a train wreck for too long.
For so long. But that's the thing, like, what do you talk about? Like, you want to try to look at the positive spectrum of things, right, and find something like a silver lining for them to grasp onto, but I literally can't see it.
Yeah,
it's gotten that dark.
It feels to me like in the German scene also like seems to maybe have a lack of in-game leaders as well, like people that are willing to take that role.
Yeah,
I can't really think of anyone
outside of Gob.
Yeah, Gob, that's it, right?
Yeah,
and he's already long gone from Mousesports. It's been like a year. So I think that was mistake number one, getting rid of Gob. I think they should have just stuck with him, even though he was definitely not fragging, up to what he used to. I mean, he used to actually be, back in the day, he used to be pretty good at fragging while he was in-game leading. But then after his break, he wasn't as good. But you never know. If it would have been given a bit more time, maybe it could have worked out. But yeah, I don't know. I don't even know where to go with this Mouse team. I think we should just not talk about it before people are just going to get a headache out of it. It's too dark.
I said earlier we started somber, and we're going to get back there again. So
it's downhill from here on out.
Low note. It's a strange set of circumstances when Big look like they're actually the best team
in Germany.
Towards Germany. Like, that's, for me, is a bit mad, but they do look pretty decent. Speaking of in-game leaders or lack thereof, Optic, Stanislaw is out. Been all over Reddit. His circumstances of leaving may not have been the best. and Hiko kind of in, but nothing's been completely confirmed yet. He will be stepping in for Vegas, is my understanding, but that's probably all. I can't help but feel, though, that if Optic have a tear of a tournament, that may be potentially locked in, or at least edging more towards that. What are you guys' thoughts? Do you think Optic can get far in the tournament?
I don't have high hopes. I'm assuming that they're like, obviously they have limited time after the swap to actually integrate Hiko into their lineup, so most likely they're just gonna have to rely on basically what they have from the get-go with the core that's still left. But they're gonna change an in-game leader. Naf might have a completely different approach to the game than what Stanislaw had in that sense, and how he wants to run things out of like your defaults and whatnot, which could pose a massive issue. You also get a kind of different player in Hiko and Stanislaw as well. So how are you going to utilize that with the current system you have? Like, how is that all going to work out with the limited amount of time you've had to practice? So yeah, I think the glory days of Optic in that sense are over, sadly. I think they're going to have a rough time in Vegas, at least.
Not sure if it's over, but it's probably going to take a bit of a hiatus at this point in time, because it's always going to be a massive change when you lose your in-game leader. I mean, it's easy. It's relatively easy to make calls, in the beginning of rounds. You can always, come up with a game plan before the game. This is what we're going to do in pistol. This is what we're going to do in a first weapon round. This is what we do if we lose, blah, 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 blah. But then when it comes to mid-round calling and stuff like that, what is how has that worked for the team previously? Has it all been him, or has it been like a thing that's been, it can oftentimes be a different player on the lineup that makes a lot of the mid-round calling. So I think that's one of the big keys that might make a difference here for Optic. If it was Stanislaw doing pretty much everything in terms of calling, they're in for a bit of a pickle here for sure. But if not, I can I can see them making a bit of waves, troubles for some of the teams here.
One of the issues that I think they might run into, obviously this is pure speculation because we haven't really heard it from Mixwell himself, but obviously there were rumors about him not necessarily being too happy about being away from home, right? Earlier, even when they were playing with Stanislaw and when they were doing extremely well, like winning E-League, getting top 2 at ECS, that kind of stuff, that he was considering going back to Europe. And if they get into a situation now where they have a longer period of poor results or poor performances because of the lineup changes, like how is that going to affect Mixwell, whether or not he wants to stick it through with Optic and stay in NA, or if he wants to move back to EU? Because I think if they end up in a situation where they lose Mixwell, I think that team is just gone.
I feel like Optic at that point should probably just pay him out so he can send his relatives and all the extended family over to the Optic house. Get a separate house next to the house they have right now.
Yeah.
For the money, right?
Family.
So
I feel like
family over there.
I feel like they're not going to find a suitable replacement anywhere nearby.
Yeah, well,
so,
I mean, yeah.
Open your wallet.
Speaking of suitable replacements, right? Obviously, Hiko was at times the in-game leader for Team Liquid. He's not apparently doing that role in Optic, which I think is going to up his level of performance. At least I hope so. A lot of people talk about Hiko being done. I don't think that's the case necessarily, but
yeah,
if you. It's still, if this change isn't permanent, where do Optic go in terms of like who are they going to pick up? Who's actually a free agent, or who is actually willing to join Optic from another team and all that kind of stuff? And how is that going to pan out? That's going to be really interesting to get a glimpse at as we go further as well. But I think Optic are in a bit, they're shaky waters right now, or shaky ground.
Yep, for sure.
So across the Liquids, obviously Stanislaw is in and Hiko is out. They have now picked themselves up an in-game leader, which is what they were sorely lacking before. And I can't help but feel that they've got the best end of this trade, that Liquid come out in a much better shape than Optic do. So obviously they're not going to be attending Vegas. They'll have some time to rummage together some strats. And obviously the next time we see them, they're going to be pretty solid, I would expect. Do you guys reckon that they could start to get towards that top level of NACS again, that we could see them leapfrog over the likes of Cloud9 and the like?
I think that's definitely possible. I think more so it's going to come down to how Stanislaw is able to work with Nitro, because during the run, obviously with Simple, they had Simple, which is a pretty big plus. No one can question that. But also the fact that during that span where they had the top 4s at majors, it wasn't just because of Simple or just because of Elite, but Nitro was playing amazingly well through that entire run. And ever since Simple left, Nitro hasn't been the same. And obviously it comes down to the fact that obviously if you have a Simple on your team, that's going to create a lot of chaos that allows for you to get more space to work with within rounds. But it's going to be interesting to see whether or not Stanislaw is able to bring Nitro back on that level that we saw him at, for instance, during Columbus. So I think if that can happen, then I think Liquid should be the #1 team in NA, and potentially like a top 5 team in the world if they, if stars align.
I mean, I guess there's the ingredients right now. I think it's definitely 100% true that the lack of in-game leadership, with now already 6 months ago coaching change and everything, has upped the stocks of in-game leaders, and that's going to make a massive difference. It's weird how it works. It doesn't even matter if you're always going to make the 100% right call. As long as you believe in what you're saying and everyone around you believes in what you're saying, things can work out. I think if he can, take everyone behind him, make this team believe in themselves once again, it's very possible. I mean, you have JDM Elige especially, who's been playing lights out recently. You mentioned Nitro as well. I mean, the question is, where does Pimp fit in all this? I think is one of the interesting discussions to have as well. What do you think, Oliver?
I mean, I think one of the benefits of having a guy like Pimp on your team is that he's very versatile. Not in the sense that you can put him on an op. Yeah, exactly. Not in that sense. But no, he's capable of playing a lot of different roles within a team. Like, I think he's very good at adapting depending on what kind of team he has surrounding himself in that sense. So as long as you ban him from buying an op, he can still contribute in a big way for his team. I think actually that comes into play for a lot of like Danish players in general. They're just very well-rounded players for the better part of it. So I think even if Pimp is set to a role where Stanislaw perhaps wants to further Elige and Nitro as a spearhead of Liquid going forward, or maybe set up things especially for JDM, I don't think that's going to affect the kind of impact Pimp can have within the team. I think he's going to be perfectly fine anyway. As long as as long as there's no personality clash between Pimp and Stanislaw, I think they'll be all right.
Yeah, and Pimp seems like a pretty chill guy, so I can't really see him having that many issues with personality clashes with anybody. May come down to leadership. I'm not entirely sure. It's, as ever with roster changes, it's always a case of just seeing what the future holds. It's hard to really give a solid prediction as to where things will go. And we are now getting to that territory where, oh man, these look like some pretty tasty teams coming up. So Fnatic, is this the return of the Fnatic era? Because these guys have been looking pretty solid since they reformed.
Well, you can't really doubt them, can you?
No.
Just looking at the lineup, it's back to the good old Fnatic in that sense. What I will say though is that even though obviously people remember the change of bringing Dennis in for Pronax, and then going on a tear, what was it, 6 tournaments in a row?
6 tournaments in a row, yeah.
Tournaments. Those tournaments that they won, even though, it's an amazing feat to win 6 tournaments in a row, and you can't, take anything away from that, that wasn't necessarily in the same kind of dominating fashion as it did with Pronax when that Fnatic era started. So I don't think this is going to be the return of the Fnatic that just wins everything, but for sure they're going to be more competitive than what they have been for the last half year. No doubt.
Yeah, I don't think when the whole Fnatic Godsend shuffle happened in August last year, everyone thought Godsend was the one that we're gonna go on to basically just live the Fnatic legacy and just keep on being that kind of type of a team. Well, that worked out great, and they even said it themselves, where they were lazy and naive even to think that they can just keep on doing the same things and play in a similar fashion, and not having to really change too much, and still be able to tear shit up, basically. I think that's going to be like kind of the question here for them. They're going to have to realize, which obviously if they haven't, then what the fuck, guys? They need to really start working on the way they play and coming up with just basically new ways of how they approach the game. Because if they can put themselves in situations where they're either even numbers or in a 2-on-3 or things like that, they have individuals who can play off of each other so friggin' well that they can come off any round. They can win any round. They're not even that close from winning. But as long, if they can keep rounds into being close, they can be very, very, very good and very dangerous. But that's up to them to come up with just new ways for them to play, basically, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's where they're in a bit of a different situation from where they were, back when this lineup played for the first time around. Is the fact that they have a different coach around. Well, Vogo's still with the team, but he was never the kind of guy who would go into the team and tell you, like, this is what you need to change up, this is what you need to do differently, and that kind of stuff. But they have Jumpy on board, and he's been with them since Epicenter, I think.
Yeah.
Roughly around that time.
Yeah.
And just knowing Jumpy from his previous teams in both 1.6 and CS:GO as well, like I don't think he's gonna allow the other guys to get complacent in that sense in terms of how they play and just get too stagnant. So I think that's going to be beneficial for them as well going forward.
Yeah, I mean it's always going to be tough to work with people that have pretty much won it all, but hoping they're smart enough to listen to him and not be stubborn about things, but instead, take the feedback and change things up. Because let's think about like NIP as a lineup, for example. It took a long ass time for these guys to realize that they can't just run and gun anymore. There needs to be a structure. It took a massive amount of time. So, I mean, kind of not exactly in a similar situation, but in a similar wavelength.
It's a common theme though for every team that's had like an era, if you want to call it that, right?
Yeah.
They ran into the problem that they're too reluctant to make changes. So you had NIP obviously, who were the first example of that, and then you had Envy, who probably took the longest time to actually make any sort of adaptations, and then Fnatic, of course, and I guess time will tell whether or not that's the case for SK as well. Obviously, they've made a lineup change as well. But yeah, it seems like everyone who's been at the top is obviously the last ones to actually realize that something's not working anymore, because it's all the evidence points to, in the past points to the fact that it is working. So that even if there's like a slight decline in their performance and there's like other teams are slowly catching up, they're going to be the last to notice that, because it's so much harder to stay on the top than being one of the ones chasing.
Yeah, I guess to conclude, very, very intrigued to see how Fnatic plays this tournament, but obviously it's still early days for them for this lineup. So, we're not going to get the full experience yet. It's just going to be a bit of a trailer in terms of what this Fnatic lineup can do in the future.
Yeah,
for sure. And you did touch on it there, Halvor, about NIP, and we had a question in chat earlier, which I think is pretty interesting. I'll definitely be interested to pick your guys' brains. Does NIP need to switch a player up or switch roles? Now, I assume that obviously what they mean is to compete with the best in the world, to be a team that's up there. And right now, I think we're in one of the most exciting times in CS history in terms of CS:GO, where there are so many teams that could potentially jockey for that top position. You talked about SK maybe slipping a little bit, Fnatic are back in, G2 obviously have the super team that we'll discuss in a few moments. But in terms of NIP, do you think they need to switch something? That they need to get, I've heard a lot of people mention Freiburg, for example, maybe needs to part way. Do you agree with that, or
that being like the last
since 2014?
Yeah.
No, I mean, in my opinion, I don't think so. I don't think they need to make any sort of changes. I think the major qualifiers versus Vegas Squadron is an anomaly, to put it lightly. I don't think that's something that you're going to see over and over again. And you have to consider the fact that if you talked about it, there's so many teams, so many extremely good teams who have a shot at winning tournaments, like any given tournament that's coming up, that you can't really expect NIP to be the same old NIP. They're not going to win every tournament. They're not going to win every second tournament. That's just not how the landscape of CS is nowadays. That no team can actually go into a tournament and be like, well, we should win this every single time. That's just the name of the game. And if you think back to it, it's not that they're not that far removed from their last win of a fairly big tournament, which was Oakland, right? So I don't really see any massive reasons. Obviously, the fact that they didn't qualify for the major is probably why they're being put under the microscope once again. But I don't think there's any reason to make hasty conclusion to it. And I think they've already kind of made a change, because if I'm not mistaken, Threat is coming with them to Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I was going to make the same thing, actually, because for a long period of time, for half a year, I think due to his studies, and I think it was a bit of a choice from the team as well. He was going to be at home, send them statistics and basically just do a lot of the analysis work for the team from home, having all the tools and everything with them. It felt like a good choice for them, but it seems like they're switching things back into a situation where Threat is traveling at least to Las Vegas with them to be more hands-on and help them. I've heard words. Obviously I know these guys pretty well, so I've talked with them here and there. There's been times where there's been disagreements on how people see the game and see situations, and like especially when coaching wasn't restricted, there were situations where he would Thread would make a call in a situation where a player wouldn't necessarily agree, but they had a protocol where if he says something, you have to abide to do it.
Yeah.
And they lost some rounds because of it in crucial situations and stuff like that. But that's kind of things that do happen. And now obviously it's a different ball game. You can't be an active coach in that sense. So, but yeah, I wouldn't start thinking about switching things up at this point. I think it's basically this talk is only because of what happened at the major qualifier. Obviously a massive disappointment, but anomaly, like you said. I don't think if we played that game 10 times, I would say 9 times out of 10 NIP would have won that game. So there were so many things that just went south for them basically in that one game. But yeah, I think let things go by for a little bit and now see how it's. NIP's been off our radar for for a good while. This is their first LAN tournament this year, right? So,
and I mean they are coming back with a a team song as well. And if that's
true.
If that doesn't put you right to the top immediately, then I don't know what you can do.
Mate, I gotta love the marketing machine that is NIP. I mean, I even still own so many NIP merchandise. I have coffee mugs, like different kind of jackets and everything. They'd be all on top of that game. So it's time
to get back on the actual game.
On top of the CS:GO game as well.
Yeah.
I just wish that worked for England. Football team always trash. Yeah, of course, brilliant.
You actually have good songs though.
Yeah, one of the worst teams though. Love it.
But...
knocked out by Iceland. Still not over that. So we did touch on this before, keeping it up with previous eras and whatnot, and some of this team certainly has those members in it. The super team G2, Shox and Kenny S, dynamic duo. Finally playing together. I think so many people are excited about this, and so far all the early signs point towards this being explosive. Thing with the French though, in the French scene, sometimes it doesn't quite work out the way you'd like it to. Sometimes personalities get involved, but I'm surely the early signs are looking great for G2 right now.
Yeah, and I think just the fact that every French team that assembles has one run in them throughout their lifetime, and it always happens at some point, and they look super good, and then they might fall off and you get disappointed and sad, and then they make a lineup change. But no, it's impossible not to be super excited about this lineup. I think this is all they could have wished for in many people's eyes. I obviously would have liked to see an existence, but then again, I'm a blatant fanboy, so can't really take that into consideration. But yeah, no, overall the lineup looks incredibly solid. It's like a Swedish version, and a French version of Fnatic, right? You assembled the best of the best. You're the Avengers now, and you're taking on the world. But again, they're not coming to Vegas, which is a bit of a shame. But it's going to be really fun to see what they can actually do once they've had some time to practice.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you really say than what you just did? It's a very, very intriguing lineup. Has all the right tools, the combination of players and everything. It seems like, it is the dream team, but usually the dream teams go to shit, don't they?
Yeah.
Isn't that always the case? Like, they're always cursed when you're trying to pick like the most perfect combination of everything, including pretty much everything around the team as well. It just goes to shit. But let's hope that that's not the case for these French guys, because they've got the tools to work with, and I think this is, I think. Just in general, if you think about the landscape, how it looks like all the teams making upgrades in terms of their lineups, I think Thorin put it so well when he said after Ashali's won the major that now they've done it on hard mode, and they're going to have to go on the nightmare mode because all the teams have done some pretty immense upgrades.
Yeah, and it's actually pretty fun because we were in a period of, if you go back, 6 months back in time, etc., where there were a lot of team changes, but not necessarily upgrades galore. It's kind of just everyone staying on an even keel or just getting slightly weaker. overall, which wasn't, didn't lead to the best of CS. But I think right now what we're entering is just a complete madhouse. It's going to be absolutely insane with how stacked all of these teams are, and it makes you kind of wonder how some of these changes didn't happen sooner. In that sense, like how didn't we get to this point earlier on? But it's better late than never. Yeah, I for one am super excited to see what this G2 team can do.
I guess one of the ways we haven't seen Shox and Kenny S play together before is that Smiths and Shox bromance, really, with him taking more of a back step. But yeah, I mean, this has all the makings of maybe being the next era, so to speak. But I don't want to speak too soon, because as Natu said, we've talked about this before. Natu, you can have the 5 best players in the world. If they don't click, it doesn't matter. It simply doesn't matter. So definitely one to watch out for. You can't really mention G2 without Envy, the other side of the French shuffle. Originally, they were kind of coined to be picking up a player called Vendetta Vegas, which I'm going to be honest, I don't know a great deal about. And then watching him play and Scream actually come in instead and just tear G2 a new one. Like, he went deep. He went super deep on them.
There's a lot of anger in there.
Yeah. Because I think he's probably the player that if you're talking about G2 have the best French players available, Scream probably taps on the shoulder and says, you what, mate? Like, maybe I deserve to be a part of that as well. So has a point to prove. But Envy, certainly, I think it's safe to say, coming out slightly worse for wear in this trade. Not quite looking as strong, but there's always that potential there with them.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like you said, they're always like they're going to be that team who can ruin. I don't think we're going to see this Envy lineup win a tournament. I think that's a safe assumption, at least not one of considerable size. But I do see them being that team that constantly messes up a tournament run for another favorite, which is also fun to have. So, and that's partly because of what you talked about, right? Like, if you have a guy like Scream who can just go off and basically obliterate a team of superstars on his own, then you're going to have a shot in any given game. But obviously, there's going to be a limit to how long that can last, right? So, remains to be seen. But yeah, they got the raw end of the deal in this trade, but it's not a bad team by any means. You still have a lot of good players on that side.
It's like a little project for Happy, right?
Yeah.
Pokemon project.
Yeah,
that's what we call it in Finland. When you get new kids, it's the Poke school. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I think saying it's a raw, they got the raw end of the stick is I think probably the best way to say it. There are so many players that could potentially beat something, could find that next level, and now. Even if some people don't agree that Happy's in-game leading abilities and whatnot, he's still done some big things in this game,
sure.
in the past. So it's again, they can definitely ruin some days, and you never know how that works out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see as well. Obviously, they brought in XMS. I'm not going to be like the highlight player of that lineup initially when the announcement is made and everything. But he's been doing well for himself in LDLC. It's going to be fun to see how he does, because I think it's safe to assume that EnVyUs are going to get a lot more chances at bigger tournaments than the LDLC lineup were, even though LDLC were gradually getting better and better. So it's going to be fun to see how he can do for himself as well, if he's going to be potentially one of those guys who can take the next step of the French players to get into that elite group. So it's going to be cool. And they've brought in a different coach as well, which is Malik, who has been around since basically the dawn of time in French CSS. Played with pretty much all of these players at one point or not. And was constantly in like the second or the third best French team in CSS. But, he's a reliable head to have to help you out in sticky situations as well. So it's going to be fun to see.
I definitely feel as though XMS and Twanu were kind of the players, the next tier down from all the top tier French players or Belgian players. Mm-hmm. So certainly he's a great rifler, has crazy skill. I've cast him a bunch of times. He's always impressed me. So definitely curious to see what he has to offer going through into the future. And obviously he's quite a young player. He still has plenty of time left in him. Could always upgrade to a better team further down the line. So we've gone on quite a while now about the roster changes. Just one more that I'll bring up, and obviously you guys can discuss any more that you want to after that. But SK, obviously we discussed about eras. We discussed about them maybe being on a bit of a slope on the downward trend. Phelps in, FNX out. A lot of speculation as to what that was all about with FNX. I'm saying it's personal, but Phelps is in anyway. Do SK come back from this? Do they continue their dominant form, or is this pretty much them slipping down to everyone else's level again?
I think might be the most hard to judge lineup change, because I think Phelps is an absolutely amazing player, and I think he was by far the best player in Immortals, which speaks a bit of volume. And I still think he's going to be absolutely great, because Fallen has shown that he's able to integrate players into their system and have success. You saw Fox at the Major, for instance. He was doing a very, very good job there, much better than what we saw from him during his time in FaZe. So I think Phelps is also going to have that kind of a security, or like have that confidence to play his own game and actually be efficient. The problem is that they're replacing a very unique player in FNX. FNX is not necessarily straight up the most skilled guy, but he's so reliable. Like, he's just a rock. He's the immovable object that you want on your team, because you can rely on him in any kind of situations. And in a similar vein as what we talked about with Rubino, the fact that he was an excellent clutch player, FNX is that as well. Like, he just makes unwinnable situations winnable for your team. So I think both teams might have gotten an upgrade, or they might just I don't know. I think Immortals are going to get a new dimension to their play with FNX, and I think SK are still going to be definitely terrifying to play against.
Yeah, I think in addition to all that you said there, I think the fact that these basically Immortals and SK know each other so well, they almost live together, right? So
yeah,
I think there's the massive amount of chemistry already just going into everything. I'm sure he's like, they both sides study each other's game and watch it, try to learn things all the time. So I'm not even sure they'll have to go through strats before they just go play, because they'll probably know exactly what each other have to do. But it's really super hard to judge just without, like, this is the kind of a change where you really do need to see them play before you can make a call on how it can affect on the team. Because I thought, SK actually played pretty well with Fox as well, with a couple of months in, or 6-7 weeks of practice. So I feel like this is definitely an upgrade in comparison to Fox in terms of individual skill. So this, I don't see a reason why SK shouldn't still be a team that is either going to be very, very close to making it into a final, but at least a semi-finalist in most of the tournaments.
Yeah, I think it's a much bigger likelihood of this being a positive outcome or positive change for both teams than it is a failure for both teams in that sense. Basically, it's just two really, really, really good players, but very good at different things who swap teams. So we're going to see how that pans out. But SK Gaming have shown that they've done well during adversity previously, so I'm not going to doubt them now as well. And I think it's the best pickup that they could have made as well, because Phelps was by far the best Brazilian player outside of SK.
Yeah, it did make a lot of sense. Plus, as Natu said, they got that brotherly vibe going. They know each other so well. Hang out, obviously, good mates outside of the game as well. So
that goes a long way.
Yeah,
all mates, of course.
Yeah.
So after all those roster changes, I'm just curious to ask you guys what you think overall is the best deal and the worst deal out of all the teams. Obviously, take a couple moments to think if you need to, but who would you say? I'm going to go ahead and say right off the bat, I think Mousesports got the worst deal out of all of this.
That's not even a contest.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it. That's how obvious it was. I wasn't even counting Mousesports into the contention of this.
They just win by default.
Yeah.
But if you want to go second
or
worst,
lose by default.
Yeah, they lose by default. I think the second worst change, or like second team that got the raw end of the deal in that sense, would probably be Liquid. Maybe. Obviously, depending on how they're able to. No, not Liquid. What am I saying? Optic. Jesus.
Yeah, that's what I was like.
I knew what you were saying.
Yeah. Jesus. No, Optic. Yeah, because they go from having an in-game leader who's highly sought after in a region that doesn't really have too many in-game leaders to fall back on. So that's obviously that could potentially be a massive issue for them. Best end of the deal. I'm tempted to say FaZe. I'm assuming we're not just going with like the completely reshuffled rosters. Like, you can't say like G2, because obviously that's like a completely new team in that sense.
Yeah,
just like
and EnVy as well, right?
Yeah, well, or Fnatic for that matter, where they kind of just brought back everything. But yeah, no, FaZe to me getting Nico in, that's too insane to not have hopes for in my eyes. I just think they're gonna do really well.
Yeah, I think out of the ones that we can choose in this situation that are not like a complete overhaul of a lineup change, I think FaZe probably has to be that team. It just adds. Nico is a phenomenal human being in Counter-Strike. He's something else. He's from the friggin' Matrix.
Yeah, pretty much. He's Neo.
He's the actual Neo.
Especially if you take all of the constraints and stress and woes of team leading. If he goes Terminator mode, then yeah, he's right back up there again, and he's going to be an absolute monster. And FaZe with Carrigan's leadership as well. I mean, these guys could be real contenders, going through. Now, obviously, it's a pretty solid segue to go through and talk about DreamHack Vegas now, because the groups, obviously, there's 4 of them, and each group consisting of 4 teams. So I'm going to read through Group A and just have a little discussion over this. So for Group A, Astralis, North, Optic Gaming, and Complexity. I think it's safe to say that Complexity are massive underdogs in this group. It kind of goes without saying.
Yeah, they're going to win it.
They're going to win it.
Win it all.
Yeah.
I don't know. They have 2 UK players, Vince. How can they not win?
Yeah, we're destined to lose. UKCS, mate.
No, but Group A is pretty top heavy in my opinion. I think Optic are going to feel a bit out of place, obviously with the roster changes. I think to me this is a very clear cut Astralis and North advancement, just right off the bat. Obviously the domestic matchup to decide who's going to come out on top could be very interesting. North have had a pretty good track record versus Astralis, at least with their old lineup. But right now, yeah, I would put Astralis as number 1 to go through in the group, and then North second. And it doesn't really matter who places 3rd or 4th, but I do hope for Optic's sake that they're not in that kind of a dire state that they lose to Complexity.
I mean, that would be the indication, wouldn't it? If they lose the Complexity, shit's gone south pretty seriously. But I pretty much
the extra mile. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. North and Astralis. If we're going to talk about the whole group, right?
Yeah.
Right. We're not just going to do individual games. Astralis is the North, but Optic. I still feel like they have something. They got some firepower going for them, so they might at least make it tough for North, especially the first game and everything. That's when surprises happen. Most often morning games as well. Like morning games are the biggest upset potential always. But yeah, I feel like they can make it tough, but still, in the end of the day, Astralis and North, it's going to be the Danes to rule Group A.
Yeah.
The interesting
thing
thing
best of ones.
Yeah, all best of ones.
Keep that in mind. So yeah.
And what I was going to say is the interesting thing is I think if you had another solid team in Group A, I could see potential upset here, because obviously Astralis and North both shit the bed at the major early doors. They both lost their first couple of games. They both went really poorly. And that's Astralis. I believe they lost on Train against, was it Godsent? They got battered like 16-8 or something. So clearly these two teams do start fairly slow, typically. I can't help but feel with Astralis winning the major, there's a lot of those pressures of the curse and choking that may be alleviated somewhat. So we could see a revitalized Astralis come through here and just stomp, or we could see them return to old form and have struggle.
Yeah, because it's obviously, if you want to play devil's advocate, do you think, because like Astralis went through hell and back to win that major, right? They've fought their demons, they've vanquished them, pretty much Constantine at this point. But the question is, now that they've reached the mountaintop, if they're gonna fall off or not. I don't see that being very likely, but it could happen that they're still on a bit of a high from the major. I
think what everyone talked about MVP worthy plays from Caribou. He was amazing. Glaive coming in, being a great in-game leader, and also fragging so well. I think just the general grit that this team was able to showcase. Yeah. Like if you think about the third map of the final, they were down pretty big, and still doing a lot of fast-paced strategies, basically yard rushes on Train, and everyone committing to 110%, everyone just playing so well. That's what really amazed me, and especially against Virtus Pro, that had a great tournament themselves. They had also shown some great composure coming back in some tough situations in a lot of games. And then Astralis being able to win against Virtus Pro in that fashion, I think is what was the most impressive thing for me, which I think will take them. I think going forward, that's the kind of energy that nothing else will give you except for those kind of wins.
Yeah, and I do think the fact that they're starting off their tournament versus complexity is going to be beneficial regardless. So if they have,
it's a great warm up.
Yeah, if they have a slow start, it doesn't really matter. They're like, there's no way they should lose to complexity, regardless of how much of an off they have, right? So, in that scenario, if they might, start a bit slow versus complexity, they should be ready for game 2. So, yeah, I don't think they're gonna fall off the mountaintop. They're gonna be super pumped to play more.
Yeah, so I think we're all in agreement. Astralis and North will go through with Astralis in first place. Of course, it is the top 2 teams that progress through to quarterfinals. We'll be losing 8 teams, and 8 teams will progress through to the playoff stage. It's just best of 3. Pretty standard stuff. Group B, this is a pretty brutal one for Misfits. I think it's pretty much Misfits, Virtus Pro, Fnatic, Gambit, and then Misfits in the 4th spot. It's hard to see how Misfits get anything done in this group for me. I mean, Gambit, even a team that you probably think won't make it through, are still a really good team.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah, that's an interesting topic right there. Is Gambit going to go through or not? I read on Twitter, I think, that Zeus was tweeting how half of his team is poisoned.
That's not.
Has anyone else read that?
What, food poisoning, do you mean?
I don't know. He just wrote poisoned.
So, I didn't see that.
Well, the hell knows?
There's like the thief from Reigns of Castamere just like playing in the background.
Yeah.
Then you see like
someone saw their
Bugo or something walking behind the team, just smiling. I don't know.
It is Vegas, so who knows what he means by poison? It could mean a lot of different things.
Yeah. I'm surprised if no one dies there, by the way. Especially from the talent. Like
I was going to say,
Rip Henry G is dead, mate. Is freaking dead.
We have a pool going.
Anyway.
But yeah, Group B for me, the problem for me is that I think like Gambit's success have come on the same 3 maps. Like they have 3 go-to maps, kind of. And since they're seeing how it's going to be a best of 1, Fnatic are going to have, or because I think Virtus Pro are going to go through in this group, no questions. I think they're going to top the group as well. So it's going to be a battle between Fnatic and Gambit. And I think if Fnatic have done their homework, they're going to ban out the best maps for Gambit, and I think they will do perfectly fine on an even playground versus Gambit, just because they have this insane skill ceiling, and the fact that, as Yona mentioned when we talked about the roster changes, Fnatic are a team that are not really ever out of any rounds ever because they have the players that they do.
Yeah.
So that's going to be incredibly beneficial for them to have, even if they get off on a wrong foot in the best of 1 versus Gambit. I think they still should be able to fight through and get that 2nd spot. So for me, it's Virtus Pro and Fnatic taking Group B.
Yeah, I think it's a tough debate I have to have between, well, for myself basically, between Gambit and Fnatic. What am I going to edge it out to? I mean, Fnatic has so many things going for them, as you just mentioned, as we've been talking about before here. And Gambit, they've been the surprise package of the last 3 months, I guess, coming from DreamHack Winter, actually, they're winning that. And then, again, reclaiming that Legends status at the Major. I don't think a lot of people were expecting that necessarily. It was a potentially going to happen, but they did. But yeah, I'm slightly going to edge this towards Fnatic as well, just to the fact, as we've talked about, they've just got this. There's a wit where they can just win so many rounds off of them, just someone going off, and things just like them having as individuals the ability to improvise and make aggressive plays that would interrupt with the more methodical style that Gambit likes to play with. The kind of, I guess, trademark Zeus type of slower type gameplay, but I guess. At the same time, kudos to him for having a bit more diversity in the way they play compared to the old Navi style. But still, I do think I'm going to edge it out slightly for Fnatic as the second team. Virtus Pro definitely going to take this group, though. Like I think they made the right choice, first of all, to go to China in the beginning of the year. Make sure they'll get that tournament off from the way, and then have a pretty decent Major. Obviously they're not happy they win it, so coming second is an okay feat. and now going to Vegas. I think they're all warmed up. I think they're for me at least, again, a massive contender to take this whole tournament.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
Can't really argue with that. Yeah, Fnatic, I think we unanimously agree will go through on Group B. Group C, SK Gaming, Ninjas in Pajamas, Cloud9, and finally Tyloo. Should be mentioned that Tyloo obviously have had some replacements. They've had some roster switches coming into Vegas.
It's been a bit of a show in China when it comes to Tyloo, right? People getting suspended and brought back and then brought back again, and now eventually you'll have a lineup that is 4 out of the 5 that played last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like speaking of making changes that are not really changes or just doing weird stuff, Tyloo is definitely out there. Obviously, Bottle's gone from WESG. In comes Attacker again, so HZ is the only one who's left, and he was a part of that Tyloo lineup that initially started with CSGO back in 2014. So he's not necessarily a new face, even though he's been playing with all gamers for the better part of his CSGO career. Still, though, not going to be enough to really make a dent, I think, in this group. Then again, it's best of one, so we've seen them mess up the big teams before, but I still think this is not going to end well for Tyloo, sadly. But it's going to be fun to watch them play regardless, because anytime they get to play versus an international competition, it's interesting to see whether or not they've progressed or not. Yeah, no, for me, this is like a 3-team group, given all the changes and all the hysteria that's been going on in China. So it's going to be, SK, I think, are going to go out top 1 regardless, but it's a battle between NiP and Cloud9.
Yeah, I think when it comes to best of ones, Tyloo is always going to be a dangerous team, as we've seen in the past. They can definitely surprise most of the top teams, in any given Sunday. But in the big picture, I don't think they'll go through here at all. SK definitely going to take this group, and I feel confident NIP is going to be able to handle Cloud9. A lot of people having doubt about NIP, but I'm sure they've done their homework. They've changed things up. They've again boot camped, spent a lot of time in making sure that the way they play is going to be fresh enough so that they're not going to get anti-stratted. They're going to be versatile enough, and them having their coach with them this tournament in the form of threats of the tournament, them changing things up. It just goes to show that they're willing to fiddle with things, change things up for them to work out. So I do feel like it's going to be those two going through.
I would agree with that as well. I think NiP have a tiny bit of an edge over Cloud9, even though Cloud9 has shown some great performances. Obviously, Sao Paulo being the pinnacle of it, but I still favor NiP in that matchup. SK is clear-cut number 1 for me, and then NIP taking second.
Agreed. Plus, NiP, of course, the defending champions of the Masters. They won Malmo.
That's true.
So they'll have a little bit of reputation to try and keep up themselves. I agree. I think NiP should be able to breeze past Cloud9. But Tyloo could be the kingmaker in this group. As Natu said, I think there's every chance they could cause an upset here or there. Finally, Group D, FaZe Clan. We've already discussed their change. Nico, although I don't believe he's going to be playing in this tournament. Jacob's in instead.
Jacob, yeah.
Yep, so that's going to be not quite the powerhouse you expect. Na'Vi, Mousesports, and Renegades.
For me, Mousesports is going to be the team to watch this tournament just because of the situation. I mean,
for all the wrong reasons.
For the whole wrong, I think either this could actually be beautiful, like them just not giving a zero fucks, basically. At least Nico, and it's going to be super fun. Mouse and FaZe in the same group. Like how's that going to work? But if you look at the teams in general, I mean, the clear-cut favorites are Na'Vi and FaZe to go through. I mean, I'm not sure if there's any arguments to be made. Renegades as well. They have Adder playing instead of Ricky. An interesting lineup change for sure. Adder, who's I guess most known for being in Torpedo, which is like a tier 2 team last year in Europe. Went to a couple of tournaments. I can't remember which ones they went to. I think the Counterpit finals, maybe they did.
Yeah, it was Counterpit.
One season.
Yeah, that's pretty much the one international tournament they went to.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So this is something you and me were talking about before we went live. Is like, how did that even come about? Like, how did this addition become a thing?
Yeah, the connection. I don't see the connection between Renegades and Adder at all. which is why so many people were surprised about it. Obviously, if Renegades make a lineup change, you would have expected them to either bring in another Aussie or someone who's in the NA region. Instead, they've gone to Sweden, so following suit with what a lot of NA teams already have done, which is picking up imports. But yeah, no, Adder had a good DreamHack Leipzig by all means with QWERTY, but QWERTY didn't do too well as a team, obviously. So I'm not really sure how much stock you can put into it. And obviously, this is an extremely last-minute change. So who knows how much time Renegades have had to play with him, and I don't think he can be necessarily a difference maker to that extent where they actually do anything in this group. So Group D is still fairly clear-cut for me. It's going to be FaZe and Na'Vi. Actually, a bit unsure as to who's going to make it out on top. Na'Vi had a great run, obviously, at the major until they ran into Astralis, which is a bit of a rough go. Obviously, with different brackets, you might have seen a completely different outcome if they don't play Astralis in the quarters. But
yeah, I mean, for me, like the big issue with Na'Vi is that, yeah, they had great matches before they did run into Astralis, but if I don't remember incorrectly, most of them were CT sides, basically having big CT sides, and that's like the one thing I feel like is going to be an issue for this team is that they have seized in-game leading this, and you can teach someone to in-game lead to a certain extent, but I mean the rest of it has to come with you as you are as a persona, basically, and it's so far nothing's indicating to me that he's becoming that much better of an in-game leader. So I think that's something that, you know, I think again, I think it was Thorn has said in the coming 3 events or whatever, like 2-3 months, if they're not going to produce good results, I feel like there's going to be a change there. I feel like they'll just have to, you know, go and buy themselves an in-game leader, basically.
Yeah, I think you're on point there. So that's going to be really interesting to see. I still think Na'Vi, obviously with FaZe playing with a stand-in, and Jacob obviously very familiar with the team, etc. But obviously under new leadership in that sense. Obviously, right after Kerrigan came in, Jacob went out. I would still say that Na'Vi are favorites to take the top spot in the group, just based off of their performance at the major, because I don't see them necessarily running against any of these teams having that powerful T sides to the point where Na'Vi get completely messed up. So they can still rely on those solid CT halves.
And FaZe looked so good at the major until they were up 15-9 against SK.
Oh yeah.
Then I lost all hope for them. Basically, that meltdown, they left me hanging there for sure.
Yeah,
I wasn't a great fan of that. But yeah, I think that's true though. I mean, those two are gonna go through.
Yeah. I don't think anyone can really realistically make an argument against that. Obviously, Mousesports, they're gonna have Oscar and Nico in. I don't believe Chris J's playing, is he? Because he comes in afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's going to be the Mousesports of old, but again, like
it's going to be no
Nico
Fox
really going to give a
Mousesports.
shit. Yeah,
but it could be a bad thing. It could be a really horrendous thing, or it could be a magical thing.
Yeah, it could free Nico up to go ham, right? Like maybe he just doesn't care as much about in-game leading.
Well, not just Nico as well, but Oscar too, right?
Yeah.
So you do have two juggernauts in that sense on that team who could do big things, but it's still going to take a hell of a performance for them to beat FaZe or Na'Vi.
It's still hard to see them knocking one of those two teams down.
Yeah.
Something we haven't mentioned yet, and I'll slap myself on the wrist for that because I should have brought this up before. Inferno is back in the map pool. Dust 2 is out. Which of the teams do you reckon is going to be playing Inferno the most? Because this definitely does throw a spanner in the works.
Fnatic. Nip.
Virtus Pro. Yeah, SK. I mean, I'm guessing SK and VP were very willing to introduce Nuke into their map pool.
Yeah.
SK is a team we know is always going to be on top of their game when it comes to implementing new things and, you know, not being in the resistance when it comes to playing new maps. So I'm pretty sure those are going to be your usual suspects when it comes to it. And there's a lot of similarities when it comes to playing Inferno or the map in general. The big thing obviously is the skybox thing, and you can't make banana into that kind of claustrophobic experience anymore as you used to. So it's going to be very, very interesting. This is going to be very interesting for me to see how two teams approach it, both sides, CT and T side. because you kind of, if it's decided, you need to have that information, right, to be able to have rotations on point, to know what's going on in Banana. It's if you don't have that info, it's super uncomfortable to play. So very interested to see. But yeah, SK, VP, NIP,
honestly,
Fnatic.
If you go back to the point where, well, obviously the first iteration of Inferno and CS:GO, was there any, like, none of the teams that are at Vegas vetoed out Inferno or didn't have Inferno as a part of their map pool? Not a single one. Inferno was that staple map that every team knew how to play. The only time you'd avoid it if you're playing against like a top 3 team on Inferno, that type of thing. So I think this is a case where it's going to be curious to see. Obviously, the teams who were shit at Dust 2, hello VP, they're obviously going to go with Inferno and make that, you know, a staple of their game, which it has been in the past. But I think every team is actually going to bring in Inferno. It's just going to be a question of what they drop out. I think a lot of teams are probably tired of Cobble. So that's going to see a lot less action.
I don't think we're going to see Inferno, and like I'd be surprised to see in best of ones for a lot of these teams, because there's still a lot of unknowns. You know, it's always tough to put yourself.
I think someone like Tyloo could.
Well, yeah, when you're like the super under. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I'll give you that. But in terms of like an established team,
yeah, but I'm thinking like teams who have, let's say Gambit. Obviously, this is a bit of a, well, it's a wild guess, right? But Gambit didn't have the wildest or like the biggest of map pools established already. So for the teams, if you're going up a team that is assumed to be better than you, and it's best of one, so they're going to have plenty of vetoes to actually move your stronger parts or stronger maps, you do have now, you know, that potential ace up your sleeve, not because necessarily you're very good on Inferno, but because the other team doesn't know what the fuck they're doing on Inferno.
Yeah.
Right? Unless they want to just solely play like they did on old Inferno, which is not necessarily going to work to the same degree of effectiveness. So I think for the underdogs in this team, they're going to jump on Inferno like a horny rabbit and just pound the shit out of it if they can.
That's an interesting analogy.
How long it's been since the teams knew it was going to Inferno was? I think it's like 2 weeks, right?
Yeah,
it's something like that. Yeah,
on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's been about 2 weeks, yeah, I think.
Something like that.
Well, that's something like that. The teams will have had some time to work with it. So, I mean, I'm just generally speaking, very excited to see how it plays out. Because Inferno definitely all-time favorite maps. So
yeah,
just
excited
to see
the
how
new Inferno is actually really nice.
Yeah. I mean,
really nice.
Like the one thing I saw, I think Happy wasn't happy about he's not happy about anything in life. It seems like when he never smiles, does he? But yeah, he wasn't overly happy about the fact that you can't throw smokes anymore from CT1.
But I think like with time, you're going to see more, I guess, newer smokes, being figured out and see how you can play around with that. I'm really happy about the fact that you can't do. Like you said, create that claustrophobic prison cell in Banana anymore, like you used to. But I think that also would have been solved just by the change to the layouts and the width of Banana and the entrance to pool on B. So even if you allow the skybox to be open, you could still work around that. But yeah, sure. Like I've always been a proponent of having skyboxes being open on every maps because it allows for more tactical creativity. But as for now, I still think it's an upgrade from the old Infernos. I think it's going to be wonderful to watch. Even though teams are not going to be well versed on it, I'm just going to be really happy and excited to see it back in the pool.
Yeah, just hoping it to be played many times.
Yeah,
I genuinely feel like most people in the community, casters, teams, the crowd wants to see Inferno. That's such an amazing turnaround. Nuke definitely didn't have the same reception, I think it's safe to say. But Inferno, everyone, myself included, wants to see that. So we've wrapped the groups up. I want to get your predictions on who you think is going to take the whole thing. So if you give me 2 teams you think will likely take it. The crazy thing about it is right now, we discussed this before, such an exciting moment in CSGO history where we have so many teams that could potentially take it. So it's a bit easier in that respect. So 2 teams you think will take it in a dark horse, a team that you think could surprise. I'll go with Astralis to win, VP, if not, and then Fnatic actually I'll have as a dark horse. I think they could really turn it on at this event and prove a lot of people right, with the return of Fnatic. What do you guys reckon?
It's not a bad list. I'd probably go with the same top 2, and my dark horse would be SK Gaming instead of Fnatic.
Wow, it feels like, is SK Gaming a dark horse nowadays?
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously they've made a lineup change. VP and Astralis haven't, and VP Astralis came out of the major 1 and 2. So
I feel like dark horse
in
is
that
more
sense,
in the terms
right?
of like, yeah, I don't know, yeah,
It's a bold
I don't know. I'm not sure I'm buying that.
it's not a bold statement, but if you're not number 1 or 2, and well, yeah, I mean, if you want to go real dark horse on this event, then I don't know,
Misfits.
Well, yeah, well, that's
Renegades, Mousesports.
But
I see now, without having all too much evidence on why, really, this is just a wild goose hunt. Basically, it's just like it's interesting to see how NIP has evolved since the last time we've seen them. Because it's been a while since we've seen them play.
You're turning You're turning into Henry.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I'm not going Henry G because there's no coming back from that hellhole. But yeah, for me, they are an intriguing team to see how they play. I think, like you guys mentioned, Virtus and Astralis are the strongest contenders. I think Astralis is, at this point in time, probably the most complete team. Virtus Pro is not that. They're very close right now. I think that final could have gone either way, if you're honest, right? So those two are the heavy favorites for me. NIP, if you want to mention a dark horse, I guess. And it feels wrong to say NIP as a dark horse too, right? But I mean, they did bomb out of the major qualifiers. They've not been on a hot streak recently, but now again they've had some time to practice and to regather their things and see how it all pans out.
Okay, I'll give a better dark horse than SK Gaming because obviously we talked about how many potential favorites there are to actually take a tournament. I'd go with North, and that's partly because you mentioned like the finals, Astralis VP could have gone either which way, but VP could have very easily not been in the finals at all.
Yeah,
like they were down 12-3 versus North on Cobble, and North somehow managed to mess that up in an amazing fashion. I think that was like the biggest choke of
classic Danish moves, boys.
I
think that's maybe something they got from Astralis now. Astralis has become big boys now.
They've adopted the curve in that sense. But up to that point, or North looked extremely good for the better part of that tournament up till those that final half versus VP, and who's to say what they could have done if they made it into semis, etc. So yeah, if you were gonna go for like a more of a solid dark horse in that sense, then yeah, North is gonna be my pick.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I think we have a
That's
question.
Way better than SK, man.
Yeah, I mean SK, but come on, if they're not top
just
two,
made
right?
the fucking semis of a major with a stand-in.
Yeah, it didn't make the finals, did they?
Okay, the standards are pretty high for.
Yeah, I don't know, but
really.
yeah, I mean it's a luxury problem, right? You have too many good teams to find a dark horse, really.
Yeah, that is first world problems, isn't it? Really, at the end of the day, that's why I'm so excited about CS in this year. I mean, there's so many. We don't even have G2 here. That's another team that if they're here, we'd be saying, okay, they have a real.
That would have been a solid dark horse.
Yeah,
that would have been a solid dark horse. But yeah, that's a pretty exciting time ahead for sure.
I've got a question from chat. I'm never a huge advocate of the crowds like winning a team a game. I'm not too sure about this. I'd be curious to see what you guys have to say about this. Could the crowd help any team with a sixth man come into play in any matches, or rather, what do you expect from the NA crowd in Vegas? So do you think we're potentially going to see like Optic or Cloud9 or the NA teams come through and get a victory? I don't really put so much credence in that person.
I think they have to start winning rounds for the crowd to get into it, and I don't think that's going to happen.
That's fair. Yeah.
Wow.
Right. Well, not that bluntly, like they're going to get 6, obviously, but I don't think it's going to be in a situation where you have like one of the NA teams being on the cusp of winning, and that's going to, be driven through by the crowd getting amped as fuck. And especially, I think we have, I think there was a picture tweeted from where the group stages are being played as well, which is like in the middle of the casino. So I highly doubt there's going to be like a lot of crowd surrounding them during that stage, which is obviously like that negates the fact that crowd might have any sort of impact to it, and also how loud they can get. But I do know alcohol is allowed inside casinos, so you might have a couple of people who get really loud.
I'm pretty sure they pretty much tell you to drink at casinos.
Actually, yeah, they have like people walking around asking you. I know that at the Bellagio they have free.
Would you like a refill on your gin and tonics, sir?
Yeah, because it's all free.
Don't mind if I do.
Yeah. It's all free because they want to get super shit-faced and then gamble more. I've experienced this.
But yeah, I'm as cool as it is playing in front of a crowd. That's the one thing you miss from the heydays when I was almost 32 with 3 kids and a wife, basically.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make a difference when it comes to. I don't think it makes a difference. Like the whole 6-man crap. Just come on.
If it's like football or something where the players can actively hear very clearly the crowd chanting whatever on home ground advantage, I can kind of see how that helps. And there's been studies and all kinds of scientific stuff put into that. But when you're in a booth or when you have noise cancelling headphones, you're really not going to notice it anywhere near as much.
Yeah.
And when you look at the NA teams in DreamHack Las Vegas here, in group stage, you're going to be playing against some of the best teams in the world that aren't going to crack under the pressure of being in front of a potentially hostile crowd. It's just not going to happen. SK Nip, they're not going to be deterred by that. They've been around the block a fair few times. Astralis have been there and done it already. VP, good luck Misfits, getting them off their game. Like, these guys will just steamroll you. If anything, the crowd, like, getting on their back will make them even more hungry to go into plow mode. So I just don't see how the crowd really affects any of these NA teams to get an upset, personally. I think it's going to be more a case of the EU teams failing if they lose, really, here.
And I mean, in a lot of scenarios, I wouldn't be too surprised if there's more people who are fans of the EU teams than some of the NA teams. Like, sure, Cloud9, they're going to have their fan base and they're going to have their relentless fans in that sense. But outside of them, who do you see having the crowd, right? Like, probably nobody beats VP or NIP in that sense. Like, so I don't really see how that's going to have any sort of positive effect on NA teams. Just how it is.
If anything, it may even be more likely to make them choke if they're ahead. You know, there's that home ground almost expectancy.
Liquid curse coming back.
Yeah, definitely. So I really don't put too much into that. Any final thoughts then, guys? I think we've covered by and large most of the stuff here. The roster changes in DreamHack Vegas.
I mean, my last thought is this is going to be the full-on CPL simulator. If you're going to watch and follow the whole tournament, staying up all night watching because of the I have a 10-hour time difference to Vegas. You're sitting at 8 events and you're 9, yep. So still pretty brutal for all of us here. So it's going to be a good week of Counter-Strike once again. And not long till then we're heading to Katowice. So this is like a roller coaster that never ends, boys. It just keeps going on.
Yeah, no, pretty much. I think I'm gonna skip the 4:55 start on Navi Mousesports.
I'm gonna wake up for those games. Actually, I'm gonna wake up to watch the last games of the day, basically.
Yeah. Don't think that's happening, but yeah, I'll definitely be up late at night tuning in for sure. It's gonna be a super fun tournament. And again, the fact that Inferno is back is just gonna make the tournament so much more enjoyable as well. Because we could have taken the normal scenic route of when a lot of teams make changes that they're going to be unpolished. It's going to be a lot of weird stuff happening, which pretty much was the last 6 months of CS leading up until the major. And the major was luckily fantastic. But I think this is going to be a wonderful event to watch.
With so many teams capable of winning, plus Inferno, I think this could be fantastic to watch. I'm completely in agreement with you. Well, I think that's going to wrap things up then, guys. Thank you very much for joining me, and of course this has been State of the Game number 11. So we'll see you. Oh, actually, hold on a second. Did I just say the wrong title?
State of CS.
State of CS.
State of the Game might get you into copyright issues.
Fair enough.
State of CS number 11.
Yeah,
it's been a long hour and a half or so. Now we're about to jump into some CS. So we'll see you guys later. Have a nice day.
See you later.